In the ancient world, a monarch could conquer an entire continent, but their physical legacy faced a relentless enemy: time. This generated time-lapse shows the fate of early South Indian architecture. Before the 7th century, builders relied on timber, brick, and mortar, materials that rotted, crumbled, and eventually collapsed into dust. The Pallava dynasty, who ruled between 275 and 897 CE, made a radical decision to abandon these perishable materials. Instead, they turned to an incredibly unforgiving medium: solid granite and sandstone. The Pallavas realized that securing their political immortality meant solving an engineering problem. To make their rule permanent, they had to master stone. That mastery began in the early 7th century with King Mahendravarman I, through a brute force approach we now call the Mahendra style. Looking at this image, you can see how his builders bypassed the problem of constructing freestanding buildings. They hacked primitive shrines directly into the harsh faces of solid natural rock massifs. Because they were digging into a mountain, these early cave temples relied on remarkably thick, unadorned rock pillars. The builders left large columns of untouched stone in place, simply to hold up the crushing weight of the geology above them. This technique lacked structural elegance, but it successfully solved the core problem of decay. By carving into the mountain itself, the Pallavas ensured these initial temples would survive. By the mid-7th century, King Narasimhavarman I shifted the dynasty's architectural focus to the coastal port of Mahabalipuram. He turned the city into a wild research and development lab for rock-cut engineering, developing the Mamala style. This image from the Descent of the Ganges relief shows the scale of their exterior rock-carving experiments. The artisans learned to treat the rock as a canvas, pulling remarkably lifelike, life-sized elephants out of the deep granite. Here you can see how they utilized the natural environment of the stone. The sculptors used a natural vertical cleft between two massive boulders to depict a cosmic river flowing down to earth, surrounded by flying celestial deities pointing inward toward the rushing water. Once the Pallava architects proved they could sculpt highly realistic life on the outside of these giant boulders, they moved to carving entire buildings out of them. The Pancharathas, or 5 chariots, stand as the most famous results of this era. Despite their nickname, these are physical prototypes rather than active temples. Looking at this wide view of the complex, you are actually seeing a monumental physical design portfolio. The artisans carved all 5 distinct structures out of a single sloping ridge of pink granite sitting in the sand. This schematic illustrates their unique engineering method. By subtracting material, artisans carved these shrines from the top down. A single mistake would ruin years of work. They used this to test different structural geometries, directly comparing a vaulted barrel roof against a square, tiered pyramid. These monolithic blueprints proved that complex, multi-tiered roofs could exist in stone. With those geometric tests complete, the Pallavas were finally ready to leap into true freestanding masonry. In the early 8th century, under King Narasimhavarman II, the architectural center of gravity moved to the cosmopolitan capital of Kanchipuram, marking the birth of the Rajasimha style. Here, the builders made a massive technological leap. They stopped carving giant boulders and began cutting sandstone to assemble buildings block by block from the ground up to construct the Kailasanathar temple. With the freedom of freestanding masonry, the king could dictate exactly how a structure looked and functioned. He used this architecture to explicitly brand the capital city with his royal authority. You can see that authority clearly in this image. The repetitive row of rearing lion pillars, known as yalis, supports the temple eaves. This specific motif acted as the direct visual signature of the king's power, repeated relentlessly across the courtyard. The Pallavas transformed architecture into a permanent billboard for the monarchy, ensuring royal power was projected as clearly as a religious message through every course of stone. This is the Vaikunta Perumal Temple, the final architectural evolution under Nandivarman II. It features a highly advanced multi-tiered layout designed to house Lord Vishnu in 3 separate postures. The inner cloister wall surrounding these sanctums represents the ultimate culmination of the Pallavas' mastery of stone. These specific carvings show figures engaged in combat and riding war elephants. The cloister wall contains hundreds of these relief panels, documenting the entire political history of the dynasty, from state sacrifices to bloody military battles against the rival Chalukya Empire. By locking their royal lineage and military victories directly into granite walls, the Pallavas created an elite, indestructible archive. Through 2 centuries of engineering, they solved the ancient problem of impermanence. Their structural innovations ensured that political history would survive their empire, forging the foundational blueprint of Dravidian architecture that would dominate southern India for the next 1,000 years.